You're listening to The Implanted Word with Pastor Bill Gem of Grace Church in Amarillo, Texas.
The Implanted Word, your word in me.
He will judge these certain men, the ungodly men and women. Secondly, it warns us that we also must continue walking with Jesus. Don't miss that. Keep yourselves in the love of God. It warns us that we also must continue walking with Jesus. If the past spiritual experiences of these angels didn't guarantee their future spiritual state, then neither does ours. We must keep walking and be on guard.
When we stumble in sin, we have a tendency to blame God for the circumstances that led to our failure. If God would have blessed us with the things we wanted or needed in a better environment, we wouldn't have fallen into those sins. As Pastor Bill will point out in today's message, living in a perfect environment wasn't enough to keep Lucifer or the angels who followed him from falling, and it wasn't enough to keep Adam and Eve from sinning. Sin is not God's fault. He is only good and just. Now, here's Pastor Bill in the book of Jude as he continues his message, Keep Yourself in the Love of God.
I turn from my ways into your love. Humble myself and accept your word. Your word planted in me is able to save my soul. Your word in me, the implanted word. Your word in me, the implanted word.
For me to understand who I'm going up to war against, to earnestly contend, I can find out where they came from. At the same time, I can have a warning not to follow in their footsteps. Because so often we think, well, hey, these guys are against us. We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What if they used to be good guys that went bad? That's why before you get into all the warfare, you have to remember the warning, keep yourself in the love of God. Because maybe they were at one time there and fell from it. So now if I was putting the sermon together, Robert should sit there and say, well, you just hooked up those verses. How do we know that that's what the Bible says? Because Robert knows very well, he's going to seminary, so he thinks he's smart. But Robert knows any preacher anywhere can do gymnastics with the Bible and make it say something it doesn't say. Any preacher can do that. But if I'm just walking through the book of Jude, I told you the bookends, I told you the imperative, I told you we're fighting the ungodly. Now, instead of me going and finding some ungodly people who walked away from the love of God, it's a whole lot better, Robert, if Jude will just do that for me. Because if it's in the book of Jude, then I don't have to win an argument. I don't have to prove my hermeneutics or my homiletics. If I'm just quoting Jude, where did these ungodly people come from? How did they fall? He's got 3 examples. 3. I love you guys. You're the beloved, right? Woo! 3 examples of how we got ungodly people. I want to remind you, though you once knew this, that the Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah, that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. What? His first reference to the ungodly. How'd they get ungodly? They were people that were delivered. Actually, he's talking about the nation of Israel when God came to rescue them. What happened with that story? 400 years of captivity. Moses, Pharaoh, the plagues. They made a great movie about this 60 years ago with Charlton Heston in it and all that kind of stuff. You know, the 10 Commandments. You've seen the movie. Have you ever understood why that story's happening? And not just for Israel, but for you. Because who came out of Egypt? All the ones who were rescued. Remember, they took the blood of the lamb and put it on doorposts of their house. Death angels passed over. You remember that, right? Then as they're going out, they could ask for money and loot, and they were just giving it to them because the Egyptians said, just get out of here. Everybody's dying. They get to the Red Sea. It's parted. They walk through on dry ground. Remember the movie? Remember these stories? Remember they get to Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments are given. They start sinning again, so he has to get 2 sets of them, the second set. Remember the manna from heaven? I mean, they wake up and there it is every day. Woo! And after 400 years, they get to Kadesh Barnea. They're about to go into the promised land. These are the rescued people. Well, send in some spies. 10 of the spies, all they could see were giants. Like thousands and thousands of giants. Like real big giants. And somehow those 10 spies. Now 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, they saw God's promises. They remembered all of what God said. It doesn't matter what the giants do. It's what God says. But you better keep yourself in the love of God, or you might all of a sudden start listening to giants who have pretty scary stuff. Then they make you feel like a grasshopper. I'm just a grasshopper. And now all of a sudden, this story of God delivering his people, rescuing his people, has turned into the giants and the grasshopper story. And watch this. The people of God, rescued by God, believed the 10 bad spies. What did God do? None of them, 3 million people, none of them went into the promised land. They did not keep in the love of God. They disbelieved the God that had rescued them. Only 2 got to go in. 2 out of 3 million people, Joshua and Caleb. I didn't write that. That's right there in Jude. By the way, if that's not enough, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, the whole thing of 1 Corinthians 10 is that you would learn from their mistake. Keep in the love of God, my friends. Where'd they come from? You can be a rescued person and leave the love of God. You can be a worshiper. You can be the greatest worshiper ever in the history of the universe. Say, where's that? Oh, it's the next verse. How about some angels? And the angels who did not keep, can I hear you say the word keep? Who did not keep their proper domain, but left. They left their own abode. God, he's reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. What? You want to talk about Israel? You want to talk about angels? Angels, by the way, you know that all the angels originally, there was no demons, no devil. There was Lucifer and holy angels. They were all created beings. They were all holy. Their main focus, their purpose was to worship God. Lucifer, the devil, was the #1 worship leader ever. He was so good he didn't need a pipe organ. He had the pipes on him somehow. I'm just saying, this guy could all by himself. And more angels, more holy than you can even imagine. They were worshipers of what? Of God. Check out Isaiah 14. Check out Ezekiel 28. Because even the angels in the presence of God, they lost it. Starting with Lucifer, who is the devil. By the way, I believe in the devil, a created being who thought he could be God. There's wrong and there's really wrong. You are walking away from the love of God. And about 1/3 of the other angels followed him. They became demons. That war is still going on. Keep yourself in the love of God. Learn from Israel. Learn from the angels, the fallen angels. Some of them are so vile and wicked, they're already chained up in darkness until the judgment. Can I see what Guzik says? These angels at one time stood in the immediate glorious presence of God, and now they are in everlasting chains. If God judged the angels who sinned, he will judge these certain men, the ungodly men and women. Secondly, it warns us that we also must continue walking with Jesus. Don't miss that. Keep yourselves in the love of God. It warns us that we also must continue walking with Jesus. If the past spiritual experiences of these angels didn't guarantee their future spiritual state, then neither does ours. We must keep walking and be on guard. Robert, am I just walking through the scripture? Okay, I'm not just pulling out points, right? So you got Israel as an example. I got angels as an example. So if I said Israel, they were rescued people. If I got angels, they were worshipers. What about if you're blessed people? What if you're the most blessed people on planet Earth? I mean, if you're blessed, that like you just live in the right spot, you are so blessed, well then surely those guys, welcome to Sodom and Gomorrah. I didn't write it. You got Israel, you got angels, and now you got blessed people. Blessed people. Verse 7, as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar manner to these, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. What is that? Blessed people. You say, how do you know they were blessed? I know my Bible. Can I see Genesis? Lot lifted up his eyes. He saw the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And like the garden of God, it's like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go toward Zoar. Translated, Sodom and Gomorrah was not like Amarillo. It was like a well-watered garden. It's like the Garden of Eden. Matter of fact, Lot said, I want to live there. It's like a rainforest. It's so good. It's so good. When I take people to Israel, I love showing them Sodom and Gomorrah today because it's at the bottom of the Dead Sea. Do you know what lives around the Dead Sea? Nothing. It's all dead. You might as well be on the moon. But at one time, it was like the garden of God. And Lot said, I want to live there. To live there was to be blessed. Can I see Ezekiel? Look, this was the iniquity. This was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride. The blessed people living in the blessed part of the earth had pride. Don't ever forget, sin always starts with pride. Like you know more than God knows? Or somehow you think you did this? It started with pride. And then it went to fullness of food. You say, what does that mean? Well, that's what you're going to do at lunch today. You're going to have fullness of food. See, what happens when you live in a place where everything's well-watered and stuff, having fullness of food is not a problem. Not a problem for Sodom and Gomorrah. They're so blessed. They got more than they can eat. They don't have to work very hard to get it. You're so blessed that you got more than you can eat and you didn't have to work hard to get it. Do you know what that means? Well, that means you got fullness of food and the abundance of idleness. You're so blessed. You have so much food, you can survive on a 4-day work week. You don't have to work 7 days or 6 days or even 5. You can be a couch potato in Sodom and Gomorrah because you're so blessed. You can be a glutton on that couch in Sodom and Gomorrah because you're so blessed. And then somehow you can think, look what we did in this set of cities. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. Let me get this right. You're the blessed people in the blessed part of the earth. You have more than you can eat. You don't have to work 70, 80, 90 hours a week to get it. You get to lay around, do whatever you want, and you're selfish. You don't really want to share it. You don't want to help the poor or the needy. You don't. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Oh, the sexual stuff never started until you get through how the sin really started. Therefore, I took them away as I saw it. United States of America, right there in Ezekiel. I'm not dogging our country, it's just the truth. And what are we up against now? Ungodly men, ungodly women who can't figure out even who they are. And they'll change whatever gender they want to change. They'll have whatever surgery they want to have. I'm not saying that everybody's doing it. I'm just saying that's where we live. What's the root cause? We left the love of God. We did. What's the warning? Don't you leave the love of God. You say, well, I would never do that. I'm just mad at all the ones that did. Maybe the problem. How do they act anyways? Let me make sure I didn't forget something here. I don't think I did. How do they act? The actions of the ungodly. What do they sound like? What is it? And it tells us right here in verse 8. Likewise, also these dreamers, that'd be the ungodly men, the ungodly women. These dreamers, they defile the flesh. They defile the flesh. They reject authority. They speak evil. They speak evil of dignitaries, that would be the glorious ones. Yet Michael, the archangel, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moses, dared not bring against him, the devil, a reviling accusation, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." But these ungodly men, ungodly women, but these speak evil of whatever they do not know, and whatever they know naturally, like brute beasts, irrational animals, like brute beasts. In these things they corrupt themselves. What do these guys look like? Well, they defile the flesh, they reject authority, they speak evil about everything. They're yelling at everybody. Be careful that you never yell at the devil. Michael the archangel would not yell at the devil. The Lord rebuke you. Be careful that you don't rebuke dignitaries. Be careful that you don't speak evil. Be careful. Don't defile your flesh. You said, you're talking about the ungodly ones, right? But I've already reminded you that the ungodly ones came from the examples that we just set forth. Israel and angels, blessed people. What happens to them? It says, woe to them. Woe to them. The ungodly ones. Can I hear you say, woe? That's not good. Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain. They've run greedily in the error of Balaam. For profit, they perished in the rebellion of Korah. The ungodly ones, wow. That doesn't sound good at all. It's not good at all. But what if I stop for a second and say, okay, that's what happened to them. That's how it happened to them. But what if I said right there in verse 11, that's why it can happen to you? I mean, we can look at the actions of the ungodly, or we could just look at 3 reasons why we move away from God's love. 3 reasons why we move away from God's love, according to Jude. Now, you already got the kicker. Make sure you keep yourself in the love of God, right? Here's 3 things that could move you away from the love. The same 3 things that happened to the ungodly. Notice what it says. 3 reasons why we move away from God's love. Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain. You guys know the story of Cain, right? If I said, the anger of Cain. Cain, the older brother, got really mad at the younger brother. Remember? Wasn't a lot of people running around. They both wanted to serve God. They both brought their produce. Cain brought his. Abel brought a sacrifice. Abel's was by faith. Cain's was not. And Cain got mad. Cain got angry. You say, well, how do you know he got angry? That's what Genesis says. God showed up and said, why are you so angry? Why are you so angry? What? Because I favored your brothers? Hey, you know what, Cain? Sin is crouching at the door. God said this to Cain. Sin is crouching at the door, but you must master it. He didn't. He killed his brother. He killed his brother. And then he's marked. Can I tell you, he did not continue in the love of God. What happened? Anger. Anger. Anger took Cain out. Question. You're not angry at anybody, are you? Just ask a question. Took out Cain. Took out the ungodly. Well, you don't know who I'm married to. You're not angry at your wife, are you? You're not angry at your husband, are you? Well, you don't know my boss. You're not angry at your boss, are you? Well, you know my neighbor. You're not angry at your neighbor, are you? No, it's my pastor. You're not angry at your pastor, are you? Oh, you'd be surprised. I'm just telling you, the first thing you got to deal with is anger. It took out Cain. Keep yourself in the love of God. How about greed? I didn't write it. The Holy Spirit wrote this in your Bibles. It took out the ungodly. Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain. They have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit. They have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit. You guys don't think about money at all, do you? You're not greedy, are you? You don't watch the stock market too much, do you? You haven't tried to figure out how to get any extra money from your place of employment, have you? You haven't cheated on your income tax, have you? You're not following after Balaam, greedy for more and more and more, have you? You know the story of Balaam, don't you? I'm running out of time. Don't make me go. You know, remember, Balaam was a prophet. He's a prophet of God. Then he was hired to come and curse Israel, 3 million people. He said, I think I might want to do that. The donkey was smarter than Balaam. It's actually dumb Balaam, smart donkey. You remember the story? Then you get out there and Balak says, just curse him. He can't curse him. He puts all these blessings on him. But then he figured out a way. I can give bad counsel if you give me some money. And the Bible clearly tells us he was a prophet for hire. He was in it for the money. He was greedy. You're not greedy, are you? You should be content with what the Lord's given you. But if you're greedy, why did Balaam, who spoke some of the most beautiful prophecies in all the Old Testament about the coming Messiah, end up a heretic and a loser? Because he did not keep himself in God's love. Why didn't he keep himself in God's love? Greed. What is greed? Never being satisfied, never being thankful, always wanting just a little bit more. Anger, greed, envy. Envy. Job tells us, and perished in the rebellion of Korah. Remember the story of Korah? It's one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. I just love it because I like being able to visualize stuff. Remember, Korah was a Levite, tribe of Levi. He got to serve at the temple. His whole family around him, everybody got to serve. But it really bugged him. It bugged him that, here comes Moses, here comes Aaron. Aaron was a part of the priesthood. And Korah, a Levite, wanted to be a priest. But what makes you so special, Moses? What makes you so special, Aaron? And Moses and Aaron go like, I didn't pick it. God picked it. Well, I want to be like you. You're no better than anybody else. I mean, this is all in the Old Testament, and that's actually true. But God's the one who picks what you're supposed to be. But don't we have a problem like Korah with envy? You want to be somebody else. You want to have what they have. You want to look the way they look. You want the job that you think I came up with this? It wasn't my choice. Literally, it was not my choice. That's up to God. But I'm telling you, the sin of Korah was envy. The sin of Balaam was greed. The sin of Cain was anger. You want to know what will take you out? What do you want us to do? We need to run to Jesus. I need to make sure I'm keeping myself in the love of God. Let me be a prophet. Before you get home, driving your car, somebody's probably going to make you angry. When you go out to lunch, wherever, somebody's going to pull up in another car, and then you're going to be envious of what they have. If you're not careful, you'll figure out how to get more stuff by moving the border of your neighbor's yard a little bit. Keep yourselves in the love of. John Corson says this: I would not have chosen anger, greed, and envy as the three reasons people move away from God's blessing. I would have listed cocaine, pornography, larceny. Why? Because those things are not my problem. You see, we tend to think the sins that will take a man away from the spout where God's blessings come out are the biggies that we don't do. Not true. God has an entirely different way of looking at things. And in his word, he says through Jude, to me and to you, these three specific areas that will keep you from enjoying and experiencing my love.
The implanted word.
Thank you for joining us today on The Implanted Word with Pastor Bill Gem. Pastor Bill is teaching from the book of Jude today. If you grew up with siblings, then you have no trouble identifying with this New Testament book. Jude grew up very close to his half-brother, Jesus, and like any typical brother, he did not believe Jesus could possibly be the Messiah. After all, they grew up together, playing and fighting and doing things brothers do. If Jesus was the Messiah, then jealousy would surely creep into Jude's heart. Why do we find it so hard to see the miracle of purpose in others when we look so desperately for it in our own lives? It's a question to think on as we're in the book of Jude. The Implanted Word is a ministry out of Grace Church in Amarillo, Texas. No matter what book of the Bible we find ourselves in, Pastor Bill is going to point us to Jesus. If you're in the Amarillo area and you've never been to Grace Church, we invite you to come check us out. We're a diverse group of believers who count on the grace of God every day, and we believe you'll fit right in. You can learn more by clicking on the Grace Church link at the top of the page on theimplantedword.com. Once again, that website is theimplantedword.com. We have services on Sundays at 9 and 11 a.m. and Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. If you can't make it in person, you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We're glad we got to spend this time with you, and we hope you'll join us again here on The Implanted Word.